Hello, welcome to a new episode of Positive Reinforcement. We're up to episode 6, the podcast where I give the Overwatch community a treat. What's up, my dude and dudettes? How are we doing? How are we doing this week 5 of the Overwatch League? That's how I track my dates these days. I just go by the Overwatch League calendar. When I call my parents, etc., I reference and I plan ahead by stage 2, week 4, etc. This is how I keep track of my day, so get used to it. This is stage 1, week 5. How are we doing? How's work? How's vacation? How's life? Have you been reading any interesting books? Let me know. At Reinforce on Twitter. Tell me how you are. I like to get to know my listeners. Not really, but I hope you all are doing well. This is week 5, stage 1. We just wrapped up week 4, so I'm actually going to talk about week 4. It's been a long day. It's Monday afternoon. I'm getting this podcast out a bit late. I didn't record a podcast last night because I got home from work after a long day at work, and I was just exhausted. And I also had some other things to take care of, some work stuff. So it got really late, to like 8 p.m. I headed over to not to Whole Foods. I always confuse Whole Foods with the Tender Greens restaurant. Tender Greens. I went over to Tender Greens, got myself a salmon salad, and wrapped up the Sunday, with some drinks with my co-workers, with some friends. So I didn't really have time for a podcast yesterday. So we're doing it today, a bit late at Monday evening, I guess, for a lot of people. Monday evening. Essentially. So if you were sat on the bus on your Monday morning commute and you missed my podcast, I'm sorry. You'll have to listen to it on Tuesday instead. It's not the end of the world, but I do apologize because apparently that's what I'm supposed to do. I apologize. We're wrapping up week 4. We're wrapping up the results of week 4 here on the Positive Reinforcement podcast. We got I want to say a lot of things to talk about, but it's not actually that much to talk about. Bad teams continue being bad, and good teams continue being good. For the most part. There's a few exceptions, which we are going to talk about. But first, I mean, we might as well just get into it, really. We got the LA Valiant that announced today, Monday. Maybe it was a good thing I missed out on yesterday's podcast. Today, Monday, they announced that they're letting go of Coach Moon following an 0-7 start to their 2019 season. And this was honestly pretty unexpected for a lot of people. And a lot of analysts, I do have to say. A lot of people were looking at this like a player issue. Like they couldn't get along and therefore Kuki was playing and what is going on here. I think I have to collect my thoughts a bit. I think this is the LA Valiant believing that they can fix, quote-unquote fix, this current roster and make a run for the season playoffs. They simply think it was a coaching issue, that he couldn't get the players to work together properly. He couldn't really make sure that they were on the same page. I mean, if you just look at the players on stage in their player camps, there's so much emotion. There's so much frustration. There's so much anger and sadness going on. There's a lot of issues on this roster, and clearly it seemed like Valiant didn't enjoy the way Moon was going about things. So this was a bit surprising because a lot of people look at this roster and think that there's too many issues for you not to make player changes for the remainder of the season. I think you have to change things up. And I said this on my past podcast. I don't know if it was the last one or if it was 2 podcasts ago, where I said that the stage 1 roster cannot look the same like the stage 2 roster because there's just simply too much. I don't know. Do I want to say bad blood? I don't necessarily think there's bad blood, but there's just so much. There seems to be so much disagreement about how to manage this roster and who to play, etc., that I think you'd just be better off with a fresh start with new faces. A coach only does so much, honestly. From my player experience, it was different back then. We didn't really have a solid head coach, etc. I guess Arrow to Dallas Fuel is a different example in that the players lacked leadership. I think in Valiant they had leadership. It was just the wrong kind. And so I'm looking at this situation and I go, Coach Moon seems to be, from the outside, a pretty good coach. He's just not managing the current roster good enough. And so if we change one or two players up, we could look at a good team that Coach Moon could probably take care of, be happy with, and ultimately lead to success. But now when they've let Coach Moon go, you still have the problem of a roster that seems to be in a lot of disagreement and not happy playing with each other. I read in an interview not too long ago with Kareev that he said, when asked who was the best player on your team on that day, he said Kuki. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, Kuki has never been even remotely close to being the best player on Valiant's team in their games. It has almost exclusively been Space or Isayaki every game this season, who are the two consistent great factors on this team. And just by Kareev stating that Kuki was the best player on the team that day, that just simply frustrates me. It makes me upset because that's just false. That's just clearly delusional, or whichever way you want to put it. It's just so out there that I don't know what to make of it. It makes me upset because it's just so wrong. So whatever. I don't want to go too long about this issue or whatever. We'll see what comes of the LA Valiant, but I think there's more to the LA Valiant than just Coach Moon. And so we'll see how this develops. I'm really looking forward to see if they make any roster changes, because I don't believe this roster will make any stage playoffs. Maybe they'll make one. Okay, let's say they'll make max one stage playoffs with this current roster, if they're lucky. Apart from that, I don't think they'll make the stage playoffs. Because I just don't think that the current roster have it in them to perform as good as they expect alongside other teams. Like, I don't think Kareev on DPS is going to work out for the LA Valiant. It's just, if they continue playing Kuki, I don't know if that was solely Coach Moon's decision, but I just don't have any hope. I just don't believe this current roster has what it takes. And so I feel like you need to make some new roster changes as well to just gain a fresh start and try to start anew, essentially. So we'll see what comes of it. We'll see what comes of it. I'm just a bit confused. It's a drastic change that will require more drastic changes, in my opinion, if you want to be a successful team and make the season playoffs. So we'll see. Anyway, that's me talking about the LA Valiant. We got that out of the way. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Vancouver Titans versus Chengdu Hunters, because this was the game that no one saw coming. The game where people started tuning out because it got late in Europe and late on the East Coast. And then, bang, Chengdu Hunters goes to map 5 against the Vancouver Titans. But let me just say this. I believe my listeners on this podcast, you guys are very rational. You actually understand how things work. And so I'm just going to say this. Ameng is not a great main tank. He's not a great main tank. And I don't care what you guys say. He's a wrecking ball, one trick. And he had the performance of a lifetime against Bumper and the Vancouver Titans. I think Bumper borderline threw at times. Didn't play well. Tried to be fancy and had questionable plays. And as a result, Ameng looked really good. But no, Ameng is not a great Reinhardt. He's not a great Reinhardt. I don't even know if his Winston is any good. He's a wrecking ball one trick, and I will not buy into this narrative that Ameng is some kind of god or anything. I know it's mostly like jokes or memes or whatever, but there's also a few players that legitimately think that because he played decent this game, he's some kind of god now. And Super, he was very much being... I don't know how to say it. He was simply trying to meme about Ameng, saying he was good when he was actually when he's actually not that good. Anyway, so that happened, and I think this game says a lot about the Vancouver Titans. Honestly, it says that they're lacking something. They're not as perfect as the New York Excelsior, and they have their own flaws. Now, I don't know how they mentally approach this game. I don't know if they went into this game and thought like, oh, this will be an easy sweep. We're taking it a bit easy. We don't know if we prepare less for this game than we usually do. Maybe it was a bit of a trap game. Who knows? But it does say a bit about the Vancouver Titans, the fact that they went to Game 5 against the Chengdu Hunters of all teams. And this could be a huge problem for them going into the stage playoffs, where teams could maybe not necessarily spectate this game because no one will play like the Chengdu Hunters, but they could start acknowledging some flaws in the Vancouver Titans that they can utilize and abuse in the stage playoffs. I think there's no way that Vancouver Titans wins the stage playoffs after this game. I think that New York Excelsior are still the favorites. They're still the number one, and they are going to win the stage 1 playoffs. So, interesting to see how this develops, to say the least. It was one hell of a game, and then Slime booped people on Nepal, and the Chengdu Hunters quite honestly threw. They did through. Elsa threw. Ameng decided to dive down on Sanctum and threw. So there was a lot of throws in this game. But so did Vancouver Titans. Vancouver Titans threw a lot as well. Bumper threw multiple times. And so it was a game of throws. And it went to game 5. Other teams we're talking about this week. The LA Gladiators. The LA Gladiators, they won 2 games. So essentially, I recorded my podcast, which was people are still sleeping on the Gladiators. But clearly, it was just a week too early. So that narrative, people are sleeping on Gladiators, kind of died last week, you know, with them losing to Hangzhou Spark. And they also lost to that other team, which I can't really remember, but I'm going to look up right now. They lost to London Spitfire in a 1-2 loss. And so that sort of narrative was 1 week too early, which, you know, doesn't make me the happiest man on the planet, so to speak. But they're clearly showing that they have the individual skill to compete with some of these top teams in the league, and they should continue from here on out to solidify themselves as one of the strongest teams in the league. Stage playoffs contenders all the way. Might even win a stage playoff or a stage title this year. I think they have so much potential on this team, and I think they're going to be so good. I think they're going to be so incredibly good. So, interesting to see what happens with this roster. DK had some questionable grabs, some incredibly questionable grabs versus the Guangzhou Charge. I think I counted it, and he had 3 Gravitons, which didn't capture anybody, quite honestly. And so that's just quite terrible. But it looked better. It looked better overall. The teamwork looked a lot better. Big Goose fed a bit less, Hydration fed a bit less, Roar fed a bit less, and then when you stop feeding and you survive for a bit longer and you deal more damage, etc. over time, and you survive longer, that's just enough for your team to actually start getting some wins. So, very happy to see the development of the Los Angeles Gladiators, and I hope that continues. I think they're done here, aren't they? Yeah, I think they're done. They played 7 games so far in stage 1. So, moving into stage 2, let's take a look at their early schedule. They got Shanghai Dragons in week 1. They got the Shanghai Dragons in week 1, and they're playing the Seoul Dynasty in week 1. So they got back-to-back games on stage 2, week 1. They're playing Shanghai Dragons and Seoul Dynasty. That could be 2 interesting games. In my opinion, they should be able to beat both of those. and that should put them into a 2-0 start. And then we're just sort of looking at the momentum of the LA Gladiators. They played the Guangzhou Charge and the LA Valiant in back-to-back games on week 2. They got a bit of an annoying schedule. They got 2 back-to-back weeks, so that's pretty annoying. So they played the Guangzhou Charge and the Los Angeles Valiant in week 2. So, I mean, theoretically, you're looking at a 4-0 start to your stage 2, and you carry some momentum from stage 1. This could be a team that could sit at the top alongside New York Excelsior and Vancouver Titans in stage 2. So, looking forward to see how that goes. Very happy with this roster. We'll see if they implement Reaper as well. We'll see if they start implementing him. There's a lot of things going on over at the Gladiators. Looking forward to see it. Anyway, looking at some of the other teams in week 4. We obviously had the Paris Eternal. Disappointing. And, I mean, this team clearly doesn't have a good story. We looked at the stats on the Watchpoint Shadowburn. And soon, they do not look like capable Sarias. And if you're trying to be a good triple tank, triple support team, and you don't have a capable Saria, I mean, you're out. You're just not a good team. So, while they might have the best understanding of triple tank, triple support, I don't even know. That was probably not even true at all. That was a false narrative going into the league. Even if they have good understanding of the composition per se, and they have a great Lucio, they don't even have a good Saria. And Saria is the most important hero, dare I say, in this triple tank, triple support meta. And so they just don't have the player personnel to excel in this meta at all. And quite honestly, they're not making the stage playoffs. So, incredibly disappointing from this team when we thought they would be able to compete with some of the others. I think that Ben Best was hyped up to be a bit better than he has performed as well. Hip, he's a good Senora, but is not the greatest. He has some questionable transcendences throughout the week as well. Fincy, decent diva, but I mean, there was a reason that Sideshow put him at number 17 in his end of season rankings. And I think there was a reason that I put him at 15th or something in my end of season rankings. It's just the individual skill on this roster is not there, honestly. And I'm a bit disappointed. Because as a European, I wanted them to represent the European region and really prove a point. But I just don't think they have the player personnel required. Even if we go back to a dive meta or a hit scan meta, and suddenly Soon is some kind of god. Like that, we expected Soon to be the star player, which he isn't in the triple tank, triple support, but he might be in coming metas in stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. He might be the star player once again. And even then, I don't think they have the player personnel required to compete with some of the best teams on this roster. And I mean, it just makes me sad because I'm a European. I wanted them to do well because they're quote unquote my region, in lack of a better way to put it. So I hope we see some pickups or even some trades to get this team going back on their feet. I don't know what to really make of it, but I don't have any faith in this Paris Eternal roster from here on out. I thought they would look pretty good in stage 1 because of understanding of triple tank, triple support alone, but they've clearly showed that they're inferior in stage 1, and so that makes me super not excited to see them in stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. So I'm very bearish, so to speak, on the Paris Eternal. Not looking forward to that at all. We have Toronto Defiant grabbed 2 victories. They secured, there was a third team to secure a stage playoff spot alongside Vancouver Titans and New York Excelsior. A big surprise to many, and I mean, obviously a big surprise to me as well. I had them ranked pretty low. But we need to talk about this team. We need to talk about this team. We need to build some kind of color for this team. We need to start talking about this team and what they identify as and what they represent, because this is a team that will continue fighting in the top alongside the likes of maybe not New York and Vancouver. They might not be that good, but they'll compete with San Francisco Shock. They'll compete with Philadelphia Fusion in metas to come. Philadelphia might not look the strongest now, but they will be. Los Angeles Gladiators, etc. You guys get the point. This is a team that will compete among the top. They won't be an average team, in my opinion. They won't be a mid-table team. They will be there fighting for stage playoffs, etc. a lot. So we need to start talking about this team. Ivy is the obvious choice a lot of players bring up. And he has insane damage output on this Zarya. Like, he is an extremely good Zarya player. But when I look at this team, I think of Envy and I think of Neko, and they're sort of my go-to players on this team. I think that Neko honestly hasn't been the best Zenyatta so far in the league. Like, he hasn't really been a top 3, borderline top 5 Zenyatta in the league so far. But Envy has been a fantastic diva, and so he's the one, in my opinion, that I look to on this team as the great performer that carries his team to victory, which I did not expect at all. I was one of the big critics of Envy, and I just didn't think he was on the Overwatch League level. But clear with good coaching, he has proved all of us, and even more so me, wrong in his capabilities and so on. We're looking forward to follow this team moving forward. I think that they have some faces that are very likable and some players that I could look forward to watching. And so I think we'll get there. People will start to recognize the Toronto Defiant and start to like them. And they might be recognized as one of the top teams when we end this season. And I think they'll grow quite a fan base. If you haven't checked out any of their YouTube videos yet, make sure to do so, because they produce some great content with Coach Bishop and also their GM Jay. So great stuff coming out of the Toronto Defiant. We're looking forward to see what they can produce in the future as well. Let's see. Seoul Dynasty are knocking on the door of stage playoffs. They quite honestly are. They have a match against Alona Spitfire next week, and that's going to be the big decider. That's going to be the big game. Can Seoul Dynasty make the stage playoffs? I did not think this was possible, and I looked at strength of schedule, and it is below average. It's like 0.45 or something, their strength of schedule so far this season. And so it's very unexpected that they ended up in this position. I didn't even think they were going to be in contention for it, but here they are, and we have to talk about this team. Can they bring down the London Spitfire? Well, certainly after Shanghai Dragons took down the London Spitfire, I think it's certainly possible that Seoul Dynasty can take down the London Spitfire and actually qualify for that. They have good map differential going into this game, so if they make it a narrow win, that might be enough to put them in. I don't know the exact playoff scenarios for Seoul Dynasty coming in, but they're in a pretty good position if they can get a win against the London Spitfire. So very exciting to see Seoul Dynasty performing well. And even if they play with their quote-unquote B roster or whatever, they looked really good as well. And so I would not be surprised to see some of those names integrated into the team later on. I don't necessarily think that Mitchell, while he is a really good Sombra, I do think we could see some of Sunba's Diva. While Fisher is recognized as one of the top tanks in the league, quite honestly, he has been a bit subpar so far this season. And that's not entirely his fault. That comes down a lot to team resources, etc. and the team playing behind him. But I think we could see some more Marvel. That's not totally against my understanding of this team. That's something I would look forward to see the Seoul Dynasty team reinvent. Because that's what they're doing, right? They're sort of reinventing the Seoul Dynasty and picking apart this core and putting it back together. So I'm really happy to see this Seoul Dynasty team working through their issues as well. I don't think Munchkin is indispensable by any means. Munchkin has been pretty average so far in the Overwatch League, looking back at Season 1 and also now in Season 2. He has a great tracer, but apart from that, I think he's pretty replaceable. And so if Fitz steps up to it, and you could rely on Fleta as sort of your profit candidate, and then you could have Fitz be your second DPS. I think that's quite plausible, and so I'm very excited to see what Seoul Dynasty does here. Let's look at their Stage 2 schedule. to see if they can gain any momentum. That's so important, and I always bring that up. It's so important to gain some momentum. They're playing against the Gladiators since week 1. We've been over that. That's going to be rough. But after that, they're playing Vancouver Titans. Oh no, we got the Gladiators, Vancouver Titans. And then I have Dallas Fuel. That would be a great game in week 3. So, and then I have Houston. They have Houston and Valiant back to back in Dallas. That's going to be pretty cool. So, maybe late stage 2, this team can start gaining some momentum. And that's going to be really fun for this team. I've said it before. I'm not a Seoul... I don't know if... I don't like to call myself a Seoul Dynasty fan. But I do like what they're doing with this roster. And they're getting some pretty good results. And so I'm pretty happy to see how they can continue to experiment with their players. To find the right balance and succeed. Looking at all of my sports experience, etc., I'm the kind of dude that likes when a team does some rebuilding and picks up some exciting players and sort of makes a run for playoffs, etc., with some players that are relatively unknown through good coaching. So I'm really looking forward to see what Seoul Dynasty can do. And they picked up some nice wins. So London Spitfire, if they win that game, they could go into the stage playoffs, but they'll probably play New York or Vancouver in the stage playoffs itself. So, not expecting them to go far, but nonetheless, it could be a small achievement that you could build upon with these new rookie players. Let's see what other teams we can talk about. Hangzhou Spark, obviously disappointed a bit more. I think we've all sort of lost all of the excitement we had for that team. Long gone are the days of them owning and dive. They just are not a good triple tank, triple support team. And I don't think it will ever be that way. So I'm hoping for new metas. I'm hoping for new metas for this team so they can start performing. Perhaps see some more Gushue Winston. He does play a lot of Winston actually. But it's not really paying off in this meta particularly. So still waiting on the Hangzhou Spark. See what they can do. San Francisco Shock. They did lose to the New York Excelsior. And I don't want to say they looked vulnerable against the Paris Eternal, but they looked volatile. Like they had their moments of glory, but they also just lost some ridiculous fights at times. I mean, they were never going to lose that matchup. But I'm trying to assess this San Francisco Shock team and sort of see where they're at. Right now, I have them ranked at number 3. I might change that tomorrow in my power rankings to maybe 4 or something. But it doesn't feel like they deserve to be there. I will say that they've had a really rough strength of schedule. So they've lost a lot of games where perhaps had they had an easier schedule, they just would have gone on to be pretty dominant this stage. But it's hard to really assess this team because they are so volatile. I think that our stats guy, Ben Troutman, Captain Planet, he uploaded a graph that says that San Francisco Shock deals a ton of damage, but they also take a ton of damage. And so that just tells me that this is a team that is very volatile and through sheer individual skill gets a lot of wins, etc. in team fights. But they don't really have that idea grounded, that strategy required to really be consistent with that. And so I have some questions for the San Francisco Shock and how good they really are when they go up against some of these giants. They have to be a lot cleaner if they're even going to have a chance against the Vancouver Titans or the New York Excelsior, because right now they're so explosive and they deserve to be considered sort of a top team, but at times they're not really looking like a top team. So don't really know what to make of this San Francisco team. Are there any other teams we have to talk about? I'm going to take a look at the standings as well. I think this was a pretty straightforward week overall. Looking at the results, there were a lot of expected results. I think I only had 3 predictions wrong in my battle with Sideshow, and that tells me that there were just a lot of good teams versus bad teams, and sort of our narratives continue for this week. So not a ton of news to talk about. Houston Outlaws beat the Valiant 2-1, which, you know, had it been a 4-0 win, we could have talked about how Houston Outlaws are actually starting to go on a bit of a run and might even deserve to be in the power rankings. But because they only beat the Valiant 2-1, then that narrative doesn't really work out, does it? Washington Justice are still ass. Florida Mayhem, still ass. Atlanta Reign did disappoint a bit, but we'll see how that continues because they were ranked so highly and then it went on a 4-0 loss. Can't really make much of that until we see more from them. So a lot of these results were pretty obvious going into this week, and we'll have to look to week 5 instead and potentially stage playoffs to sort of tell us more about these current narratives and how the season is going to go, because so far there's still a lot of things up in the air. It's early in the season and we haven't really figured things out yet. Toronto Defiant is a new narrative that has sort of showed up with them being great and all, but we sort of have to see how that develops and how they build personality, etc. So a lot of question marks still, and for now a lot of our narratives continue. So that's going to be me on a pretty short, but I think I covered most of it from week 4, and so I'm going to end it here. If you have any questions for Wednesday, please hashtag #AskReinforce on Twitter @Reinforce, and I will answer your questions on Wednesday's podcast. If you want to support, go to twitch.tv/Reinforce, and you can donate or subscribe. If you donate, please let me know in the comments that you did it for the podcast. It's very helpful. And I'm just going to end it at that. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll let you know on Wednesday or Thursday if you're in Europe how the games will go, because I have all the wisdom. Take care, my dudes and dudettes, and I'll talk to you then.